Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organizations. Each and every episode, we sit down with experts from various fields from around the world, just like you're grabbing a coffee with them, to dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So go grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how do you influence your team to take ownership without sounding like you're micromanaging or manipulating them? How do you increase your influence? How, as a leader, do you do some of those things? That's a big question that a lot of leaders wrestle with too often. We have vague expectations. We delegate half heartedly. We wonder why our results fall flat. But what if the missing ingredient was maybe part of your communication strategy? Well, I'm excited for today's episode. We're going to dive into this idea of influence and how do we persuade as leaders and how do we communicate it. And I get to interview Tara Landis, founder of Bellrock Benchmarking, seasoned business coach, helped hundreds of leaders solve their toughest management challenges, licensed influence trainer, ProSci certified change expert. Really, you might be embarrassed by this, but an absolute powerhouse when it comes to aligning communication with performance. And so I've enjoyed following her online. I cannot wait for our listeners to learn from her as well. Tara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. What an introduction. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I love having you, and I can't wait to dive into this topic. Uh, Before we do that, maybe tell us a little bit about you. Give our listeners
Sure.
a little bit of your story, who you are, what you do, what's got you to this place.
Yeah, well, I did an MBA before the turn of the century, and knew I wanted to do something in business, ideally small business, but wasn't sure exactly what, and came upon a small business consulting firm. And I thought, what a perfect job for me. It'd be like a paid internship, and I can go and check out all these different businesses and what they do, and maybe I'll find a job that I would like someday. But it turned out that the job I would like someday is the job that I already had, which was working with companies, working with individual managers specifically and helping them implement foundational systems in their businesses. So, organizational controls and dashboards and performance management systems, project management systems, all sorts of different stuff. And I just really loved the work and got addicted to it. So much so that I had to start my own company. And so in 2008, that's what I did.
Wow, 2008.
hmm Yeah, so been doing this for, well, I've been doing this for 25 years, but my own company since 2008. And recently, I have become fascinated with the world of influence and persuasion. I think I was always interested in that. I've always had a bit of a sales bent. Everyone thought I should go to law school because I could argue well. So I think I've always had that in me. What I didn't fully understand until more recently is that this is not just a natural thing that you're born with. Some people are, but in fact, it's science based. And there are specific tactics and tricks that people can learn to be more persuasive in business and in their lives.
Wow. Well, that's fascinating because so many leaders, maybe their influence hasn't grown to the pace that they had hoped,
Mm,
probably because of their communication skills, probably because of, you know, maybe not being where they want it to be. And so it's interesting to hear that, some of that can come. When it comes to persuasion,
mhm.
uh, what are some initial steps that leaders can take to grow in that? Because I think sometimes maybe people who don't feel very persuasive, they're like, I just don't want to be annoying. I don't want to be that person
Right,
who's always going. They probably already
right.
are looking at it and some misconceptions there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting. Dan Pink wrote a book called "To Sell Is Human." I don't know if any of
Ooh.
your listeners have checked it out, but it's a great book. And in it, he talks about a study that they did where they went into an organization of 7,000 people and they studied how much of their time, how much of the non sales, non executive people's time is spent on influencing and persuading.
Wow.
Now, what I mean by influencing and persuading really is just th- trying to get somebody to say yes to you.
Mm,
So, this particular study was in business, but even at home, you can imagine that life is a little better and simpler. I've got a couple teenage boys. If I ask them to clean their rooms and I can be persuasive about it, life's a little nicer around here. And so when they did this study in this organization, they found people spend about 40%, 41% of their work life persuading or influencing.
wow.
41% is a lot of payroll and a lot of time. And when they did the study again and looked at executives and looked at salespeople, it was upwards of 80% of their time. So when you learn that kind of statistic that we spend that much time trying to influence and persuade, for me, it set me thinking, well, gosh, if that's how it's working, I want to do it well. I don't want to
Mm,
just do it. I want to I don't want to just be the natural at it. I actually want to practice this craft. So I dove deeper and I found the work of Dr. Robert Cialdini, who wrote a book called Influence, and he published it in '84. So this is like old stuff. But as it turns out, so are our brains. They haven't changed all that much in 30,000 years either. And so I started taking a look at the research and found his 7 principles for ethical persuasion. And sometimes what people want to know is, well, how do you know if it's ethical? And
yes.
the way so the way I like to think about that is there's all sorts of ways to influence people. For example, some leaders in particular really wish that money was the best way to persuade people,
Mm,
right? If I give them a bonus, they'll do the thing I want them to do. Humans are coin operated. If I stick in a quarter, out pops productivity, and if I can just have enough quarters in my jeans, away we go. But we know that that effect isn't long lasting, um, that money effect. Sometimes people even think they can persuade through force or violence. Whole regimes are built upon that. But again, the effect isn't long lasting. The way to really influence and persuade people in an effective way is by ethically doing it, which means that whatever we're trying to persuade them to do, it's not just good for me, it's also good for them. When it's
mm.
good for both of us, when we have the same outcome that we're going to get, when it's good for both of us, that's when it's ethical persuasion.
Wow. Well, that's so good because so many leaders trying to say this, rethink it as I say it, but I think sometimes we just try to get to the yes, especially those of
Yeah.
us in sales or we're prospecting and we're trying, my business is run from the next training that I'm able to book,
Hmm.
so getting to, to that next yes without really thinking through, okay, is it really helpful for them as well? Making sure that it truly aligns. Okay, back up for a second. You brought up money, you brought up force, some of the ways that
Yeah.
we get people. Uh, so much of what we do at Speak With People is around this phrase, speak with people, not at them. And I can remember years ago being handed a Daniel Goleman's book, Primal Leadership, and where he kind of broke
Yeah.
down, hey, for years, management, forced people, they were aggressive, they let out of fear. It turns out it doesn't work in the long term. And so I love that you brought that up, that in the short term, yes, we can influence people with some of those things, but in the long term, it's going to lose steam.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It doesn't last in the long term, and we want these things to last over time. We don't want to have to keep going back and reinforcing and reinforcing. Just want people to do the thing because the thing makes sense and it's in their interest to do it. So
Let's
there's all
back up
sorts
for.
of different. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I love where you're going. I was going to say with that, when it comes to the influence that we have on people, walk us through kind of what in its essence, what all encapsulates influence. What is it all in the end of the day?
Sure. Well, maybe I can take a step back. So in 2002, Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for economics. Daniel Kahneman is a behavioral scientist, and yet he won the Nobel Prize for
Hmm.
economics. Why did he do that? Well, it's because you may be familiar with him. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. But basically, what he said is that most of our lives, we are operating on autopilot. He called it system one thinking. And system one is like that fast gut feel. If I've got two things and one of them's more expensive than the other, I've got this shortcut that says the most expensive one's probably better quality. It's not always true, but we've developed these shortcuts in our thinking. And we actually spend about 95% of our thinking time in system one. System two is the slower, more rational brain. We give it some good thought. We think about all the different arguments, but we don't spend much time in system two. Now, before Kahneman's research, there was a belief in economics that humans behave rationally, right? Why would I do something if I'm not going to make money from it? But he disproved that. And so the principles of influence really start with this idea of the system one brain,
Mm.
and that most of what people are doing is running on autopilot. And so we want, as persuaders, we want to speak to that system one brain. But as salespeople and as leaders, often what we do is actually we focus our arguments around system two. Like we try to rationalize them into it. If this is the benefit and this is the benefit and this is the benefit, then obviously you have to say yes. But what we know, what the research says, is that is not the best way to approach persuasion. And there are these other 7 principles that you can apply. So we're not going to have time to go through all of the 7 principles today. But you did mention earlier this, just wanting to get the next sale and the next training session and the next thing. I want to talk a little, just give you one example of a case study on why that short-sighted thinking might not be the way to go.
Mm.
So I'm going to talk about a study that was based on one of the principles. The principle is consistency. And so the principle of consistency says that people tend to want to behave consistent with the way they have said they would behave before.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
So consistency is not that I should be consistent within my own words and deeds, although that's a good idea too, because otherwise people think you're, a liar and can't be trusted. But this is about other people wanting to behave consistently with the way they have behaved before. And so the study I'm going to tell you about is a drive safe study. It was done in Palo Alto, which is a suburb outside of San Francisco, fairly affluent. People there have beautiful homes and lots of money, and they've gardeners that help them maintain their yards and things like that. And so, what they did in the control example is they went door to door for this Drive Safe campaign, and they said, we would like to erect a large billboard on your front lawn to promote this Drive Safe campaign. What do you say? And shockingly, about 17% of people agreed. They later found out that those people, most of them had either been in a serious accident or had a loved one who was lost in a very serious accident. But only 17% said yes. Okay. They then had a different set of experimenters go around in a similar but not the same neighborhood and said, we're doing this Drive Safe campaign. We want people to be more safe. Would you be willing to put this credit card sized sign that says drive safely either in your window or in your car window? And not surprisingly, most people said yes, because it's just this little unobtrusive
Mhm.
thing. And like who's against driving safely, right? I mean, that's a hard position to take. They then had a third person go around 2 weeks later and say, I noticed that you have this support of the Drive Safe campaign. We see that you've got this card in your window. Would you let us put up a billboard to make the study more, or the campaign more effective? And when they asked that, 86% of people said yes.
Huh.
And so the point here is people like to behave consistently with their previous action. And so if we ask for a small commitment at first and then craft our asks toward the bigger commitment, we have a better chance of success.
Wow.
So that's, yeah, and that's just one small example in the principle of consistency. So if you're trying to get someone to agree to something, before you do the big ask, think about what the small ask should be that gets them along the path.
Wow. Wow, that's good. That really, that nugget alone could drastically change things. I mean, even look at it, practically, like in a household. My
Yeah,
wife and I will experience. Or this Saturday is our 28th wedding anniversary, and even
happy
something like,
anniversary.
yeah, even something like that, I'm like, yeah, boy, that would really help our relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and so in my company at Bellrock, and we have a downloadable if people want to check it out, they can get it for free, but we have something called the verbal upfront contract. And so as a manager or a leader or a husband or a parent, um, asking for something and then discussing and waiting for an active yes. And then saying, okay, well, what will happen if we don't do this thing? So explaining the likely outcome of not doing the thing again increases the odds that people will behave consistently with what they agreed to.
Wow.
So if we can just craft our ask and discuss and get an active yes and get the agreement, then we're more likely to get future yeses. The example there is Gordon Sinclair's restaurant. It's a restaurant in Chicago, and it was a reservation only restaurant. And they had a problem. It's a great restaurant, but they had a problem with no shows. And
Mm.
because it was reservation only, if people didn't show up, it's not like there was a lineup waiting to take their seats. And they had 30% no shows. So, Gordon, being a study of influence and persuasion, a student of that, he took a look at what the receptionist was saying when they were taking the reservations. And the receptionist was saying, table for four, this many people, this date, whatever. Um, if you need to cancel, please give us a call, and then that would be the end of the call. Well, all he did was change two words. Will you please call if you have to cancel or change your reservation? And then paused and waited for an active yes. That's the only change they made, and the no-show rate went from 30% to 10% with two little words. Wild, right?
Wow.
And
Wow.
so this principle of consistency is just has remarkable impact for very little effort on our part.
Wow. Boy. That's wow. That's interesting. And we'll make sure I want to make sure we get your verbal upfront contract. We'll put that in the show notes as well because those
Yeah.
resources are just gold to be able to do that. Isn't it amazing sometimes it's just maybe something that we yeah, I probably could have thought of that on my own, but when, somebody comes alongside of you and says, "Hey, here's a little tiny tweak that could, have huge dividends." It's just amazing.
Yeah.
So that just to me speaks to the power of, finding those voices who can, introduce you to those things or teach you those things. Sometimes I come across leaders and all around my office are piles of books. See the books all over
Hmm.
your office, and hell yeah, I don't have time to read. I just don't read. I don't, and I'm like, oh, like you're
Yeah.
missing out on, so many nuggets of wisdom or truth that could help propel you in ways you haven't even experienced yet.
Absolutely. But I also get it. Like we're all so busy. I mean,
Sure.
it's my job to learn all of these things. And I got to tell you, I've kissed a lot of frogs before I found all the princes. So you can spend a
Yes.
lot of time digging through to try and find the nuggets. And I mean, I guess that's why we get to make a living, right? Because we can just give them the gold.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so maybe for a second, talk to the leaders who are listening. Maybe they lead a team, and boy, they're just really struggling with getting the team to uh, pay attention to them.
Mm.
Meetings are chaotic. People are talking over each other, talking over the manager. The manager just hasn't even won that foundational uh, bit of
Mm.
influence yet. What are some steps they can take to begin to get to that place where they build some of that influence?
Yeah, well, in that case, I think I would lean more on Patrick Lencioni a little bit and talk about building trust in the team. So I might go through some of his trust exercises. It starts with the leader. So if people are,
Mhm.
for example, speaking over you or not following what you said, that to me speaks to a lack of trust and really just a lack of empathy on the part of the employees themselves, and that must have been caused by something. I like to think that most people are good people trying hard.
Mm.
And while there are some good for nothing people out there, I'm sure, who sit there every morning and think, how can I really mess with my boss today? For the most part, people don't think that way. And so if we can bring them alongside with what we're trying to accomplish and have a similar outlook, again, that we both want to get to the same result,
Yeah,
that can make a huge difference. And it starts by building trust.
yeah. Boy, trust is just so valuable, so important. You work with a lot of businesses, probably different sizes. Uh, when it comes to having a system in place, maybe for those mid managers,
Hmm.
who I find there seems to be some struggle there sometimes of leading teams. They still they're still fighting but I used to do all of this. Now I have people that do this. And so they're kind of in those two worlds.
Hmm.
What are some of your thoughts, especially with helping them get to that place where they understand, okay, their new role, in
Hmm.
leading people?
Yeah, I think that's a really common challenge, and I'm glad you brought it up. Um, when you think about those different jobs, let's just make it simpler. There's sort of the individual contributor job, and there's the manager job. And the individual contributor, their job is to do the things, and the manager's job is to make sure the things get done and to organize the resources around those things to make sure they get done. Um, what's important for the manager to understand, I think, is, first of all, very clearly what those activities are around management. Like, what are the things that they're supposed to fill their day with, and then to recognize that those are the most important things for them to do, because there's a tendency to want to slide into your old habits of doing the
Mm.
individual contributor stuff, the stuff that you were really good at, the stuff that got you to where you are. There's a lot of psychology in that says, well, if it was successful before, so why wouldn't it be successful again? But the
Right.
only person who's there to do the manager work is actually you. There are lots of people there who can do that individual contributor work. They're your employees. So we've got to pull ourselves up to that next level and work at the appropriate space of our organization. If we don't know how to do that, or if we don't know what
Wow.
those activities are, then it's time to get some training, because you're probably not the first person that's ever had to manage people. There's probably answers to these questions, just like we were saying, all these books around us that they can they can look it up, but there are specific activities to do with management that they really need to get their heads around.
I lo-
Stephen Covey tells a great story in Seven Habits. He talks about, it's a fiction, it's a fable of a company plane that's flying over the jungle, and the plane crashes, and tragically the pilot and the co-pilot die, but miraculously everyone else emerges from the plane completely unscathed. And surprisingly, out of the belly of the plane fall all these machetes. And so here they are in the jungle. They don't know where they are, but they've got these machetes and some water and stuff. And so the individual contributors grab all the machetes and they start like hacking their way through the jungle, and away they go, hacking away. And the managers are standing behind them, and they're taking back the machetes that are dull, and they're sharpening them and handing back to the front and giving water. And, oh, this person looks too tired, we're going to give them a rest and sub this person back in. And they're organizing all the resources to keep going. Eventually somebody climbs a tree, and says, I got good news and bad news, right? The good news is we're making great progress, but the bad news is the city's over there. We're going in the wrong direction. And I think of that in terms of those different roles, right?
Yep.
There's the individual contributor, there's the manager, and there's the leader. And it's really important to know what hat you have on at any moment.
Wow. Man, yeah, what a great analogy. What a great illustration.
Yeah.
And we've all been there. You talked about it a second ago. How important is it for companies to utilize things like workshops, training experiences, those different kind of, instead of just the stand up meetings. Hey guys, don't forget, you got to return
Yeah.
emails within 24 hours. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I may be biased running my own training programs, but I would say that it's really important. Now, let me tell you why, so I don't sound like I'm being completely self-serving. In the late 1800s, a man named Herman Ebbinghaus did a study, and the result of that was the forgetting curve. So you can look it up. But what basically he found is that when you're trying to learn things, if you're exposed to it once and then not again, you will forget it within 3 days.
Mm,
And but if you are then reminded of that thing within a couple days, your forgetting curve starts to flatten out. And if you continue to be reminded and practice things, you start to develop competence and eventually it just becomes part of your practice. So if I tell somebody to do something once and I don't even get like an active yes from them, that they understand what we're talking about, the odds of that sticking are very low, very low. And that's not that person's fault. That is the manager's fault for not doing a good enough job implementing those
right.
systems. So when we do coaching for or training, we run management training, and every class, the classes run 3 hours, and there are lots of tools and breakout rooms and people trying all this stuff because we're trying to like embed it into their minds. But every class comes with one-on-one coaching as well, because we want to make sure that people activate that part of their brain again so that they're using the training. They don't just like think that they learned it because they were exposed to it and then they walk away and forget it. But oh, I think I took a class in that one time, so I must be an expert. You know,
Right.
I did my undergrad degree in political science. I learned a lot about American government. Don't ask me any questions about it. It was a really long time ago and I haven't used it since. And I think that's true of a lot of management practices as well for people.
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so true. Absolutely. So, when it comes to uh, driving some of this lasting change, then, especially like
Hmm.
in the cultures of our workplaces, to try to get them, how important is it, to have some agreed upon values, to have some, agreed upon, those kind of systems in place? And does that help with some of that
Yeah.
lasting change?
Core values are critical, and core values should be. I use that word core because they should be core. They're not things you create. They're things you uncover. The
Ooh,
organization already behaves in these ways, and so that's who we are. People like us do things like this, and not behaving in that way can be a fireable offense. But if the organization does have core values, then we can count on people behaving in an appropriate way. So if the organization's core value, for example, had something to do with learning and growth and you know getting better and that kind of thing, if that's what the value was, then maybe we could lean on that a bit to know that if I've told you about this once, it means you're supposed to review it a few times. Maybe we could lean on that if it was a core value. In the absence of that value, though, probably not. Probably not. I mean, some people will just be like that because that's who they are, but we can't count on it.
right, right. So for our younger listeners, leaning in, they're trying to build influence in their workplace. They're trying to, get to that place where their voice has a little bit more weight. You've given us
Mm.
gold throughout, but speaking to them right now, what are a few steps you would give them to challenge them,
Um,
motivate them, equip them to keep
yeah, yeah.
moving forward?
Um, I'm gonna give. I'm gonna give. I'm gonna give a couple examples. One I would lean on is liking. So the concept of liking is that we like others who we have things in common with. You know, if I like potato chips and you like potato chips, now we're bonded. And so I would encourage those young people to figure out the commonalities that they have with their managers and with the other colleagues. Because when you develop liking, people are more likely to say yes to you, all things being equal. And to develop that kind of relationship, it doesn't take a lot of time. In fact, it only takes about 10 or 15 minutes to sit and chat with someone, find something in common that you can then use as your touchstone to come back to. And that activates that system one brain where I'm just going to give you a little bit more attention because I just like you a little bit better. It's just natural. It's just how we behave. So I would encourage them to start like actively, purposefully forming relationships around things that they genuinely have in common and genuinely like about the others around them.
Hmm.
The other tip I might give is related to reciprocity. And so reciprocity is um, for example, if I invite you to a party at my house, you will feel some obligation to invite me to one at your house. Or if I give you a birthday gift, you'll feel maybe obligated to give a gift in return. And so, this principle of reciprocity gets people, if we can give first, then we can get later. And so, in the work setting, what I might suggest is when you have your one on ones with your boss, and I hope you do, make sure you ask them if there's anything you can take off their plate. It's just a little gift. They might not even have anything you can take off their plate, but I got to tell you, we are all we're the stars of our own movies. And I guarantee you that
Wow.
boss is underwater. And so if you have some way to offer to help them, they are more likely in the future to offer to help you.
Wow. Wow. Gold. Absolute gold. Just incredible. Uh, it's a great place to kind of land the plane. Before I
Sure.
let you go fully, though, we're building this online library for our listeners to go and kind of just get spurred on with some new ideas. When it comes to speakers, people that you've heard at conferences or TED Talks or those kind of things, is there a speaker that just continues to stand out to you, checks all the boxes, you just highly recommend listening to them?
Oh my gosh, there's so many, but I'll go back to Dan Pink because I've referenced him earlier. He's done some great writing on motivation, on sales, on just the timing of doing things, on regret. He's got great TED Talks. I would look him up.
I love it. Not everyone is a podcast listener, but if you are, is there a guilty pleasure or a development podcast that you just keep going back to? Highly recommend.
Oh man, I would say that, I mean, there's all these standard ones that people listen to, but my guilty pleasure really is the name has just flown out of my head. With the three guys, it's so funny. You totally caught me. I did.
Oh, Smartless.
Yeah, Smartless. That is my guilty pleasure.
Yes.
I really enjoy listening to those guys. And I'm a fan of audiobooks as well. And
Yes.
I got to tell you, another guilty pleasure is David Sedaris.
Mm,
He makes me laugh out loud on all of my dog walks.
I love it. I love it. And then lastly, you're running into someone. They're about to head to a desert island. They can only take one book. What's the book you put in their hands?
Only one book. I'd put in Seven Habits. Seven
Mm,
Habits of Highly Effective People. It's pretty thick. It's pretty tough to read. Um, it's dense. I think they can get a lot out of it.
I love it. I love it. Where's the best place we can send our listeners to find you? Make sure they
Yeah,
can access your resources.
yeah. Well, www.bellrock.ca, Bellrock, is my company website, and they can look for me on LinkedIn, Tara Landis.
Wonderful. Tara, thank you so much. This was incredible. I mean, the generosity that you shared with just all of this wisdom, I know will be a huge help in the practical applications. Just love it. Thank you again for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I had a great time.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Speak with People podcast. It means the world to us when you share this episode. Thanks for liking, subscribing, or following the podcast. That really does help the podcast get into more ears and into more leaders listening. Also, don't forget, we have 2 exciting resources for you. The first is go to Facebook and join the Speakers Group. This is a community designed for leaders who want to grow their communication skills. Also, go to speakwithpeople.com/skills library to access the Communication Skills Library. It is an online resource chock filled with resources that will inspire you and transform you and grow your communication skills. Thanks again for being a part of the listening community. We cannot wait for the next episode.